We are at Drexel University in the biology department, and we study a biological question in the brain. So we study the basic way that the brain works so that we can understand what happens when something goes wrong in cases of disease such as autism. We don't directly study autism in terms of trying to look for cures or anything. It's kind of like if you're trying to figure out how an electrical system is wired up, like which switches go to which lights. In order to tell that, you kind of just start breaking the system, like turning switches on and off. So we start breaking different parts of the brain and see what happens, and so that when we flip those switches, we can say, okay, this switch goes with this light, and therefore if we break the brain in this way and it causes autism, then maybe that's the way that people normally get autism. And then if we know just the general mechanics of how it works at a basic level, then eventually someone can take it into a clinical application. I was born in Taiwan, and I grew up in Washington State. I went to undergrad at the University of Rochester in upstate New York. I went to graduate school in Providence at Brown University, and now I'm here at Drexel University doing my postdoc. I think I've always been interested in science if you define science as how things work. So when I was little, I have an older brother who's 4 years older than me, and I always enjoyed taking things apart just to see how it works. Like, when you flip the switch, what does the switch connect to that eventually makes the toy work? And so my brother hated it because I ended up breaking all of his toys. So the secret about graduate school is that you usually don't go into it knowing what field you want to go into. There are these rotation periods where you spend a little bit of time in different labs that somewhat interest you but may not be your final home. And I picked mine based off of personalities. I picked people that I thought I could work with, and it turns out that the research was also interesting. So it's not so scary as entering grad school and saying, this is the one question I'm going to work on, this is how I'm going to work on it. I think that scares a lot of people, but that's never really the case. You're really mentored along the entire way, and you can pick from a lot of different choices, and doors aren't really closed to you at any point. I am specifically looking at how the olfactory system works. So the connection with disease in terms of the autism studies that we do in the whole lab is that autistic patients tend to have hypersensitivity to smell, and that can affect their quality of life in addition to other comorbid situations like intellectual disability. So we use the olfactory system because it's a very convenient system to study the specific question we want to know. So most people know that the neuron has a cell body and it has this long axon coming out so that it can interact with other neurons. And most of the studies have been on the cell body and what all happens there. And there are fewer studies comparing what happens in the cell body versus in the axon. But the axons are very important because neurons function by connecting with other neurons. And so we're doing this compare and contrast, but most of the neurons and their axons are kind of intermingled in the brain. And so the olfactory system happens to have an anatomical structure where the cell bodies are really easily separated from their axons. And so we can, really get a pure sample of each one and do a stringent analysis of the differences.
Okay.
Science is unpredictable, and so the actual day-to-day actions that you're taking vary drastically. So if you feel like being alone, you can pick a procedure that lets you be by yourself, or if you feel like being sociable that day, then you can do something that involves a lot of interaction. The conclusions that I can make from my research can be applied to clinical research that can drastically help millions of people at a time instead of working with one patient at a time. If you're a person who would like to know about how the world works, science is definitely a way of getting at it. I think everyone should do something that makes them happy.